Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SIG Network Policy API subproject meeting. Today is the 12th of August, 2025. Let's all follow the CNCF Code of Conduct and be nice to each other. We don't have that many items on the agenda, but we do have one big item from Nadia. So meanwhile, while we go through that item, if anybody else wants to talk about other things, now is the chance to add them to the agenda. And if not, let's go to you, Nadia. Over to
Yeah,
you.
so as promised last time, the implementation for their cluster network policy API is there, waiting for more reviews. Thanks, Bowie, for very nice review. Definitely caught some unintended mistakes there. So what I tried to do is I kind of moved parts of the existing CRD, but then I had to change some of them because of the naming and like the wording, and then I found some mistakes in there, which I probably should have also fixed. Anyway, it could use a review, and then I think also Bowie asked if we should be focusing on the Go doc side of it, which I would say yes, if possible. I mean, if we can get a full review right now, also just read what kind of explanations there are, if they make sense. We're trying to explain what a tier is.
So
Yeah.
I can give some more context on that comment. So the comment is mostly that not that we don't get the Go docs right, but I don't think the Go docs are sufficient to describe certain things.
For
And
sure.
we should just make sure we're not trying to fix that problem by sprinkling it all over the Go doc. For example, if you zoom out and say look at all the docs, or some like package level doc like that, that probably from a user standpoint, when they actually consume it, will be how they understand it. So that the only comment was like, I understand, like when we are staring at it, we think like, oh yeah, for sure we need to like make it very clear in this particular thing. But like if you came to the project or this feature fresh, that might not be the place you would focus, because you would be reading some more generic doc that talks about the mental model. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect
Like
sense.
I think
Actually,
it results in like what I sometimes see is like the Go doc comments are strangely specific in like weird places, just because that's where the
yeah.
focus of the discussion was.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Actually, we did discuss that the docs in general and our like web page and whatever else we have should also be updated. I'm just not really, I think it should be the next step after we merge the API and we agree on the Go doc first, I guess, to some detail, and then I put the docs on top, or I don't know if it will be easier. Maybe I can also add it to the same PR so we can see how both sides fit together. Yeah, you tell me whatever you prefer.
Or it can
Yeah,
also
I
be a
think
separate tracker for docs if OI
Yeah,
wants
yeah. I
to.
mean, it's like I'm not planning to close that until it's done.
like for
Done with
example,
the test,
does
so
it make sense to already open that docs change so that we can focus on that one, and then we reflect it into the Go doc? I don't want to delay. So okay, there's a couple things.
yeah,
I don't want to delay updating the Go code so that you can use the API, right? On the other hand, I think we would either have to do another pass to basically simplify the Go documentation and put it into the general documentation, or some sort of rationalization. Uh, I'm not tied to any specific order. I just think that that would make for the best quality stuff in the end. Like just kind of making sure that eventually we kind of rationalize the two.
yeah, yeah. I think I do have myself like some idea of what should go into the Go doc versus just the general docs of the project. So yeah, maybe we can do it in this order. Just also maybe try to see what makes sense in an API description. I mean,
Because
regardless of what we have on our web page, I guess, and then we can do the second pass for sure.
yeah, because I think like some of the discussions is just like, I don't understand it, but it's like, well, if there was just like a general doc to explain it, then maybe this wouldn't be a question, right? Like,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
so I think the bottom line for me though is like we do need to try to get the Go code in, so like for example downstream we can kind of like figure stuff out. So, like whatever path we take, it would be good to make sure that thing is happening. Like I don't want to necessarily just get everything blocked on everything as like an interdependent blob. So if we think we can make progress by Go docs to a reasonable state where people understand what is being proposed from the semantics perspective, and then we do a docs cleanup later, that's fine with me. I just want to make sure we are able to proceed efficiently along that path. Did what I said come
Yeah, I
across?
guess that's also what I mean. So we'd still do review and like do the best we can currently for the Go doc on whatever explanation we think makes sense.
Okay.
And then we'll iterate. Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
Yeah, if we feel like we can kind of describe it properly and people understand it, then that's great. I was just, sometimes these things are just like, I don't understand what the mental model is, and then you like, for a particular field, you have this huge mental model comment. It was like, I don't know. Like
Yeah,
when people
yeah,
read that, they're like a little confused.
Okay, yeah, we'll do that then. That sounds like a plan. Thank you. So I had a couple of questions there. I mean, some of them are also in the pull request, so please go join the conversations happening there. I just wanted to bring up a couple of those here to speed it up, maybe. So first one was, do we bring both ad network policy and ANP and BNP and CNP, do we call it that, in the standard channel at the same time? Because our definition of like standard versus experimental and whatever is kind of strange. Do we need to get rid of it altogether? Like what do we do there?
The ANP and BNP, I think we get rid of it in V1 Alpha 1. V1 Alpha 2 has no mention of it. We just go with
Right.
CNP.
So after the last release that you've done recently, right, then I can get rid of it right now and only
Yeah.
put the CNP to the standard.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I'm guessing the V1 Alpha 2 is a separate folder, right? So the V1 Alpha 1 folder
Yeah.
can stay as is and we don't touch it. It just sits
Yeah.
there. But then the V1 Alpha 2 has no mention of ANP, BNP at all. And you can start just with CNP. And
Yep.
That sounds right to me.
That sounds good.
So
We can still
I
import
think
the old ones for a compatibility release, which OpenShift and Calico may want to do.
yeah, that's the 0.1.7, which we got.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think like
that
this is a consequence of like, once it, from what I understand, is like we're moving away from the V1 alpha beta whatever to this experimental standard. So maybe at this juncture, like since it hasn't gone GA or beta or whatever, like that label is less meaningful, except for maybe to guard off like very experimental features.
Are we actually moving away from the versioning? I don't think so. At least we haven't
Yeah.
decided that yet. We do have
No.
the experimental channel to introduce new fields.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. I think we're still keeping, I mean, whether we should, I think Tim Hawkins had a suggestion of not doing beta at all, like the last time we spoke in London, but I don't think we agreed on anything
Okay, I
specific.
see. But
But
I mean,
for
that's,
now, for easiness, we're going to do the V1 Alpha 2 with CNP as standard. But I don't know if Nadia, like for example, in CNP, are you bringing in FQDN? Like, or is it
Yeah.
only core?
No, everything that's in there exactly with the same tag. So what's experimental, like nodes, I think, right? It is still experimental.
Yeah,
So,
nodes,
yeah.
named ports, and
Yeah,
FQDN.
all these things are moved exactly as they were.
Okay, then I think they can all stay experimental, but under
Yeah.
CNP now, and then rest of it is standard.
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. It only basically affects the generated CRDs that we have at a given version, right? So I mean, you can
Yeah.
still always generate them yourself for a given API version. So I don't know if it will disturb anyone. As like Sean mentioned, like if anyone's consuming them and it would be better to keep them somewhere, we can also maybe discuss that. Or if everyone is fine with.
I think if we
Yeah,
use
I
the
don't know
tags,
if-
it should be okay, but sorry, go ahead.
I think if you,
I don't know if bringing along the old stuff, given that we have decided to get rid of it, is a good idea.
I don't think we should include it in the V1 Alpha 2 directory at all, but isn't the whole point of having two directories that?
No, it's not in the directory. So there are separate directories in the APIs folder.
Yeah, that's
Which
what I mean.
defines
So
the
you,
versions. Yeah, and then this part only affects I think it's under config.
I think we should leave the V1 Alpha 1 exactly where it is and leave the Go files there so we can continue to import them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly
Have a
what we're
V1
doing.
Alpha 2 directory that has no mention of AMP and BMP.
Yeah, but I think what Nadia's saying, Sean, is this one. So if you look at my screen that I'm sharing, there's a network policy API config CRD, and then the YAMLs that are generated from the Go type things are stored here, and this will completely change. So this YAML file will no longer have any ANP or CANP that is installable. So if you want to do kubectl apply, you can't do like main tag. If you do the 1.7 tag, you still get it, but she's going to completely remove this, and that part I think should be okay for you, right?
I think we haven't decided if we're just gonna sweep it away yet, or if we're gonna do like one release that can handle both. But I think that should be fine because we can always just grab the CRDs and then install both because they have a different version, so they can
Yes.
have different
Yeah.
names
And
even.
names actually, so it makes it easier.
We
Exactly.
can deal with that. Like I would move forward rather than keep it in
Yeah.
this. That's fine by me.
Okay, awesome. I'll do that then. All right, one more thing that's hopefully a quick one, but I wanted to clarify. So I also copied kind of an existing part of the Go doc for the action pass. And it's fun that we use basically, so we say that indicates that the matching traffic will jump to the next tier. And then we were trying to figure out whether we should also say pass to be consistent here, or if I thought that jump as a word kind of helps people understand what pass could mean. So give me your feedback on that now. Do you think we should leave it as jump or like convert it to pass and try to explain the field with the same name?
The problem I have with jump, slight problem, is usually when you do a jump, you have a target and you specify the target of a jump. Like if you're programming or if you're writing IP tables rules, for example, a jump normally has a specific target. So I'm not super keen on that. It's fine in the sentence. You're saying like jump to the next tier, but I almost want to reserve jump for in case there's like jump to something specific later, but
then you could say always jump to and then do whatever. I mean, pass will always jump to the next tier, I guess, right? I don't think we can introduce a definition of a jump that will not be correct in that case. Okay, well, I guess we can also maybe continue that discussion in an NPAP if there are no strong opinions. I mean, or maybe I just leave it for now and then please, if you think that we should change it, I'll link a comment here from Bowie where we can have this discussion further.
Sorry, my computer is like completely frozen. So I will take it up on the discussion. I'm not super strongly opposed, attached to any particular thing. I just want to make sure our wording is consistent.
Yeah, so that makes total sense. It's just I think for me, jump also kind of has a different way to explain the same thing because skip is like a word that doesn't mean much in a software engineering world, maybe. So jump could be like more familiar to people. That was my thinking at least. But yeah, I mean, I also can see how it could be confusing instead of clarifying anything.
And I'm guessing the reason why we don't say pass to the next tier is because pass in itself is vague, and so we're trying to use jump to explain pass. Okay.
Exactly. That was, yeah, I also thought that, and I'm like, okay, I don't know if we're explaining it or making it worse.
Yeah.
So please go to the comment section and vote. While we still have a chance to easily change it. Okay. Yeah, I guess there is kind of no strong opinion on that.
Yeah, I think like in this light, it's not. I'm not feeling very strong about it. It was mostly like a copy edit pass, just like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just find it reasonable thing to discuss.
We debated it quite a lot before. Like, I think if we're going to change it, we should list off all the ideas that we had before, like in writing and this, and
But
make
it's
sure everyone's aligned again. Otherwise, we could go round and round on it.
But I think we're
yeah,
not
I mean,
changing
that's
the
also
API
true.
name, right? Just the description side
Exactly,
of the
yeah.
types.go.
the
And we can
description.
try it, yeah, just the description. And like we said before, we don't have to block the PR. Like if jump is more or less making sense, we go with it, and we can always have a follow-up PR just to get it to perfection.
Yeah, like
Again,
the
jump if or yeah, anything seems okay to me.
like there's many steps for this API to get to whatever the release, right? So my general take is like we should block less on the small stuff and then try to get through the big stuff. Again, because right, like
we're not.
when we
I don't
do the
think
final
we're
lead,
working on this.
yeah, like when we do the final docs pass, we're going to have to rewrite some of the comments anyways. So that's all. So anyways, if you wanted to say like, hey, is this like super important? I would say no. Like if you're just like, hey, Bowie, what's your opinion? I'm like, it's fine.
Yeah, I think I'm just gathering opinion because I mean, we always hope to get this last pass through everything we have, and then we always miss some things, right? So I mean, it's just like while we are at it, let's have a small discussion. I mean, if everyone says, yeah, that makes so much more sense, I just go and change it. If there is no specific opinion, okay, let's leave it. I don't know, maybe. So yeah, I mean, we definitely
Okay,
won't
that makes
block on
sense.
this. I just just some questionable things, to see what kind of the first feedback I'll get.
Right. I think, for example, the next one probably is more meaningful because it's like a
Okay, that's
it's a more meaningful
the
thing.
best part. Yeah. So that's the other thing for the tier names. So we came up with 4 tier names, starting with admin, then goes network policy, then goes baseline, as we didn't invent anything better. And then the last one was called default in the original NPAP, at least. And that is supposed to mean the default Kubernetes policy, which means all pods can talk to each other. Now, there are a couple of comments now, one more from Sean, I think, saying that Calico already uses default as a tier name for the network policy. So instead of the default cluster policy, as we are trying to call it, the network policy tier name is the default tier name in Calico, which I guess will already cause a bit of confusion, but we don't want to get any further with this. So again, question whether we should rename the default tier to anything else, and if you have any nice name suggestions for that.
So I have opinion. Is not so. I think default is too common is dangerous to use as a name for something because it's usually talking about a value. I just thought of it like we could just call it catch-all, or like the problem is the baseline and then the last stop, right? So like the baseline, maybe we rename that to basically like if you have no policy, you are using this, and then we could put baseline as the last tier. Otherwise, we end up with 2 baselines. I personally, now thinking through it, probably baseline needs to be different and just move baseline to what is now default and then come up with a better name for baseline, because baseline is not applied in addition to your network policies. It is applied if you have no network policy.
Right. So and that's why it's a baseline. So the point is baseline policy kind of exists and is configurable, at least in my mind. And then I would probably, and then considering we had the baseline admin network policy, people are also kind of used to the name potentially. So not so sure about changing the baseline, but maybe finding some better name for the default, because the default is just like the Kubernetes default policy that exists and probably will never ever be changed. So is it like the default allow all pods to pods, whatever? Like,
so
name
okay,
that
so
makes sense.
Let's think through when the default applies. It will apply in what situation?
when none of the previous ones matched. But also if you have no policies, the default always exists in your cluster, kinda.
Yeah, it's like almost like an ambient policy, even though that is like also a loaded term.
I wonder if we should be like referring to them as tiers or just, I mean, I guess the network policy tier feels a lot like a tier. Like it's some stuff you can, it's a group of policies you can jump to from the earlier ones. It has the fall through behavior if there aren't any. But the one at the very end, like sort of, I think I suggested kind of talking about them a bit like tiers, but I was thinking that you would sort of say, oh, it's like an implicit, you can think of it like an implicit tier if you want to, but it's not a full-fledged tier. Like I just wonder if we're tying ourselves in knots to make it like to call it a tier and then define what that means rather than just say this is the default Kubernetes behavior. If you fall through all the others, then you hit this. Like maybe the fourth one should just be spelled out as default Kubernetes allow all, and not really think of it as a tier that has a name specifically. I don't know.
That works for me. I remember the original discussion was, well, you have to have past mean something, the same thing in every case. But you know, users are not robots, and robots are getting smarter. So
Actually, originally we didn't have that as a tier, and then we figured that it could be easier to explain what happens like when none of the policies match. So like it should fall down somewhere. So what happens in the end, and then we know there is a policy in Kubernetes cluster saying what should happen.
But
yeah,
it's not
I think
a
like
policy, it's a model that everything is open, right? Like it's not
Yeah,
that there
you
is a
can call
tier
it.
with network policies in it, or
I mean, yeah,
admin
network policies
or
also don't know
baseline
that they are.
policies.
Network policies also don't know that they are a tier. They're just network policies. It's just like basically all these tiers only make sense in terms of cluster network policy now. And that's also the only place where it's defined. So this name, like the default, it's not even in any constants, right? Because you cannot create a policy at the tier. So it's literally just a name we need to pick to explain it to people, kind of. So, and I also can see why we could just pick no name, but then we will still have to explain that there is something else at the very bottom that will allow all pod-to-pod communication. We'll call it something.
I mean,
so.
As I recall, given it's not going to be a constant, we could just describe it here and not give it looks like a constant. Just say default Kubernetes allow all tier. You know, something really long and verbose that's not going to go in the API ever.
As I recall, the way this came up was that whether or not you allow a baseline policy to say pass, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that where it came from?
Could be a part of it, yeah.
And also, what happens if you fall through baseline policy? Like, if you don't have any baseline policies, like where do you go from there? Like, if your admin tier passes and you don't have any network policies or any baseline policies, like what are
I think that part was still okay, right, Sean? Because if nothing is defined, so there is nothing, then it's like how you have no network policy today, and people are used to that aspect. Like forget admin and baseline, but if you don't have any network policies in your cluster today, people know the default behavior. But I think it was actually about if you do explicitly state pass in your baseline tier, what does that mean semantically?
So I think there's two things, at least, that I am focused on, I guess. One is that the specification of the behavior is very precise, so we don't have different behavior given implementations. And two is how to explain it to people. This might be a little long-winded, but in terms of explaining it to people, I'm not so hung up on the fact that, you know, the person reading it's going to process it like one of those classic Star Trek computers, and basically like when Kirk says like this sentence is false, it'll just like blow up, right? So like I agree with Sean, like if we can explain it and it makes sense to people, let's do that instead of trying to explicitly model it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that that kind of makes sense. My only thinking was that like we are not talking that much lately about what we're doing and trying to explain that to people, but having like one kind of short way to name all these tiers just so that we are consistent, you know, across all our docs, presentations, and whatever else. That kind of would be nice. So,
But the thing is,
otherwise,
you have to
people, you know,
explain the concept of like a
explaining.
virtual tier. Is I think what Sean is pointing out. You have to
Yeah,
basically be like,
exactly.
it's a
So you
tier.
will have to explain it anyway, but if you at least refer to it with the same name consistently, people will know, okay, even if it's a slightly different explanation, it's the same thing. And then if you only define it through the explanation, well, I mean, we could try to, I don't know, like.
I'm just saying, like,
define
I think it's understandable, at least from my very biased opinion, is to just say when it goes to the bottom, you can pass to the bottom. Here's the behavior at the bottom. It doesn't necessarily require, for example, subclassing in the docs like a tier subclass relationship, because it's not a tier. It's like you can't substitute it. It doesn't behave like one. It's mostly just like a handle for us to attach like the explanation of like, hey, it's at the very bottom.
Yeah, that's the question, whether we want to like name the thing at the very bottom or try to explain it.
I think it's
every time somehow.
given
So,
given it's highly likely we won't be changing it anytime. Like, I think I would just describe it as like, there's this behavior at the very bottom, and it's allow all, and that's it. It would be a big lift, right, if we had to change it later on, and I don't think naming it as a tier necessarily makes that easier, because the primary obstacle to changing it is actually like users expected one thing and they get a different behavior, not necessarily like whether or not they understand it.
so I actually don't think defining it as a tier versus not tier is a big problem, because actually in this list of like trying to explain how the policies are evaluated, it just makes sense in the list with all the other tiers, right? Showing where exactly things fall through.
The problem is it's not a tier. Like, you can't define policies in that tier.
What I mean, it depends on your definition of a tier, right?
Yeah, but it's like that becomes too
It
subtle.
makes sense because you can like jump in between them, kind of skip and like get to the other tier, and that's only defines
Like,
the
you
order.
I'm saying it would suffice to explain to someone that if they reach the bottom, there's a certain behavior, and then the pass goes to the next thing and it goes out the bottom. Like, we do not necessarily have to describe it in terms of tiers, which I think is probably too clever.
Yeah,
Right?
okay,
Like,
maybe
the reason we would do this in the code is if you could like reuse some behavior through a virtual function or something, right? Like, for humans, I don't know if that's actually that critical.
Okay, so I actually kind of like the allow all as a word, I guess, because that's a short way to explain what's happening there without calling it the default. And then, I mean, the explanation would be that that's the default Kubernetes behavior. Maybe I'll try that.
I think allow all, I have an issue with that because it is saying what it does as well as what it is, whereas we should separate those two, because it will be awkward if we ever want to change the behavior, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't
So
think that's
like, I would
possible.
just say, I would just put it as in the part description is like, and when it gets to the bottom, it will do the Kubernetes default, which is right now allow all. But we do not have to call it allow all, because that's what the behavior is,
Okay.
and not necessarily what it is.
I can try that. So, okay, if everyone agrees that's the best way forward, I'll try that and see how it looks in the docs and then get more feedback.
I've been talking a lot, like, what are other folks thinking? Sean, I know that, yeah.
I kind of like that approach. I think I like talking about network policy as a tier, because to give people the model that like we're adding 2 new tiers either side of something that you already kind of understand, and now they're all going to behave in this way. I think that works well. I think the one at the bottom being special would make it more clear, like just explaining that this is the Kubernetes default behavior. Whether we sort of talk about it, the network policy being a kind of virtual tier, or if we use it as a way in the docs to explain it, like just say, I kind of feel like if I was explaining it to someone, I sort of want to explain it by saying, you can kind of think of it as 3 layers or 3 tiers of policy, and that's how they relate to each other. We've put them all into the same model, but network policy already exists and has its existing behavior, but you can put things either side of it. I feel like I'd kind of caveat it a little bit, but maybe not. Maybe just calling it a tier is helpful. Anyway, that's rambling. I haven't reviewed the latest PR in detail. I just skimmed it before the call. I think, well, we've got a hackathon on today, so I think someone's going to have a crack at importing that and seeing if it builds.
Oh no. No, that actually would be super useful because I don't actually have any implementations or like making sure that it passes any tests, because the tests also don't exist yet. I mean, I obviously will fix it when I update the conformance test, but yeah.
So I think Nadia, it sounds like we have general consensus. We'll just fix up the
Yeah.
docs to treat the bottom as special instead of trying to subclass it from
Yeah.
tier. Like basically that's what we're doing, or like inherits from tier. What do folks think? Because it's August and then we did make a commitment to ourselves to kind of move this along. Like, can folks make a review by next week or something? I'm just curious, like how, because there's like so many steps to getting it out there.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I want us to move forward, and as I say, I think someone's going to try and hack on it. Probably Mazdak, who you met before, Nadia.
Ah, yay, my friend. That's awesome. Okay, yeah, I mean, I think that sounds reasonable. It's like also the NPAP was kind of reviewed before, and again, we can always
Yeah,
go and
so-
fix stuff. So
Yeah, so like,
as soon as I get a couple LGTMs, we can go ahead.
okay, like it would be awesome if we could just try to get this in so people can import it from the actual repo, right? And then we could get real feedback, like, because otherwise it's going to be like a patch on a patch on a patch. Like it's going to be hard for
Yeah.
projects to kind of deal with.
Exactly. Okay, well, there are not too many changes to make, and I did updates based on the existing comments. So as soon as I see new feedback, I'll go and update that again. So please go do the reviews, submit them, and we'll see where we get by the next meeting. I guess I'll try to update that as soon as possible. Okay, that's it from my side. Thanks a lot for the discussion. That was super useful for pushing this one forward.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, Nadia, for raising the points.
Oh,
And I
sorry,
think
the
that's all
last
we have on
item,
the agenda.
did we discuss the last item? Just high level
Yes,
docs open
tell-
issue. We said yes
tell me.
to this?
Is the last item you mean, should we have a high level docs and
Yeah.
that one? I don't mind us opening a new issue and doing that in parallel or separate if that gives us a
Okay,
better
I think
idea
that,
to,
yeah, that makes sense.
because
I
maybe a
think we
diagram,
should
a visual
be using
diagram
the
could also
same-
help in describing the tiers.
Is it the same issue though for the combining ANP and BNP into one CRD, or you mean do you want another one to update the docs in general, or for this specific one? Because for this specific one, I was going to track it with the existing issue.
So I think that this is mostly just like if you make an explicit issue, then maybe someone can also take that on separately, and then it can be
Well.
closed separately from a task management perspective.
So I think what I meant was like in general, the website needs cleanup. Right?
Yeah.
If we are going to,
that's
so that
another
is like,
thing.
so that is a separate issue, a high level docs cleanup, which will explain the new version of the docs. I think that can happen in parallel. Whether Nadia, you want to do it along with the rest of your work or not, that's up to you. I think I don't mind that part. But for example, I know it'll be versioned. So I know the 1.7 is going to show the ANP, BNP docs, but hopefully when we at the release, it doesn't show those and shows the other one. Like whatever that might be, we might have to restructure the website a lot, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it in general could be useful even without the new API, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. But then,
Yeah,
you know,
so
if,
Surya, like open the issue. I think it's useful.
yeah. Okay, I can try to detail all the website
Yeah,
things and
just
open an
also
issue.
please link, let me link the cluster network policy issue, and please link it there to say that we need to sync somehow, because otherwise there could be two people just changing the same thing.
Yeah,
So that's the CNP issue.
okay, sounds good. Anything else anybody else wants to bring up before we call it a day?
Nope. Let's try to get this one in. Then we can clean up everything else.
Sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day. Talk to you in 2 weeks.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye.